Now, I'm really not sure I have what to say at this point. Between Rabbi Rothwak saying my entire speech from when we did a class together in YU, to Avi explaining addiction, and to Ezzy being Ezzy, all I can say is wow. So I'm going to take my speech out, but I'm probably not going to say most of it, so I say that now. I want to start by really thanking everybody for coming here tonight. This is an issue that we've been dealing with in the community for all too long, sweeping things under the rug. And as we all know, that in order to break the stigma, we have to make a stand. And I am just blown away. The amount of people here, the entire community as one, every shul, every community leader, organization involved, just really stepping up. And TL, the room is full. I'm just saying, spoke about this. This is, I'm going to say to give yourselves a round of applause for really stepping up and making the first step to breaking the stigma. We need to really thank, as he said, a force not to be reckoned with. I'm not sure what to say, but Mr. and Mrs. Fung, you guys are just amazing. The pressure you've put on us and on everyone else just to make sure that this event would be a success. And the success of an event like this really comes about by those feeling confident and comfortable afterwards to reach out for help, to speak for those that can't speak for themselves, and to help those get a voice for themselves. And I'm certain that that's something we're going to see after tonight. I'd like to thank Rabbi Larry Rothwax, who I've had the honor and privilege of being a guest lecturer in his program in YU and the pastoral care program, and speaking about sexual abuse and addiction to the next generation. Dave, what was the sound? The next generation of rabbis, as well as for having us be a part of the Rebbitzins get-togethers. So thank you for being really at the forefront and helping deal with these issues. And of course, a big thank you to our hosts today, TABC, and specifically Terry Normand, who really just stepped up and prepared everything, and extra chairs and room and whatever else needed to be done, so thank you. And to thank again the entire community, all the Rabbanim leadership, the RCBC, and everybody else that's really involved to make this event a success so that we can really help bring an end to this epidemic. So thank you all. People often ask me, at what point am I going to get bored of speaking or setting up the same events? Because we just keep doing the same thing over and over again. And it's in different communities, different rabbis, different survivors of addiction, different family members. But come on, at what point are you going to stop? So the answer is I'm going to stop when there's no longer a need to have these types of events. That's when I'm going to stop. But as he had me do, and I gotta say, never done this before at an event, but I'm certainly gonna steal the idea in the future. Lighting a candle in memory of those that are not here any longer. Unfortunately, and I hate to do this, but I have to, in the last 2.5 years, we have lost over 200 young souls under the age of 35 to the plague of addiction from our own communities, the Orthodox Jewish communities, across the board between Hasidic, Litvish, modern Orthodox, and everything in between. That's just under the age of 35. We don't speak about the 43-year-old prominent person in a community that died of a sudden aneurysm because they have children in shidduchim. So how could we actually say why that person passed away? And we have to be very cognizant of the fact that when people do lose a child, we don't want to come out and say something right away because we don't want to bring upon further embarrassment or shame. Because again, as we've heard so much tonight, it's all about stigma. But sadly, it's the stigma that's killing us and killing our kids. When they started talking about Zika, how many people refused to travel to Florida for the off chance that their spouse might be in childbearing weight, even if they weren't actually pregnant. People spent thousands of dollars to change their trips, cancel their trips, because God forbid something should happen to an unborn child. Yet here we are dealing with issues with our born children and adults and everything in between. This is real. If I were to tell everybody in this room right now, and I'm going to steal this line from one of my associates, that in every single class in this school, there would be one child per class that would get sick with asbestos poisoning. Every grade, every class. I can guarantee you there would be a revolution to bring in the best experts, clear out the building, fix it up, do whatever it takes. God forbid nobody here should get hit with asbestos. But when it comes to addiction, we're just not stepping up to the plate the same way, and I don't know why. You know, I had spoken before Pesach about doing our annual campaign for fundraising, and I wanted to have a picture of a cemetery with a tombstone and say, please donate to the Amudim Funeral Fund, it's cheaper than rehab. And people looked at me like I was crazy. But sadly, I'm not. Very easy to raise money when somebody, God forbid, passes away and you have to help the family and pay for a kfura and do whatever it takes. But when you're trying to help people, even in things that cost minimal money or no money at all, as we've heard about 12-step meetings, Al-Anon, Gan-Anon, there's no money in that, but we can't even get that basic support. What is wrong? What are we doing wrong? And then I always get the same comment from people all the time, so I address the elephant in the room first. Who says the numbers are real? 77, 182, 277. I keep going up based on which time we're in. This year alone, by the way, we're up to 17 deaths already that I've counted, that I can confirm. 3 of them in the last 10 days. 12 days. So people say to me, what's with the numbers? Maybe they're inflated. Well, you know what? And if it's only one death, is that not one too many? Do numbers matter? So let's be practical. What can we do? What do we need to do? How can we do it? And what's the quickest way to get the results? So the first thing I'm going to mention, and you're going to hear things, by the way, that you heard from Rabbi Rothwachs, you heard from Avi Steingart, and from Ezzy, and if it's repetitious, that's fine, you can't hear it enough. So the first thing I'm going to say is we need to show support for those that are suffering. People that are suffering from addiction are suffering. We need to accept the fact that it is a disease. And just like nobody blames anyone for getting cancer, diabetes, or a heart condition, we need to stop blaming the addict. We need to show support. We need to show support for their family and friends. We need to be there for them as well. For the siblings, for the parents, for the children in many cases. It is just as important to help the loved ones. In many cases, it's more important, as you heard before, to help the loved ones, because that's how you're going to get the addict to get the help that they need. And the other message that I'm going to say now is to the parents in the room. Love your children. I know it's not easy when they're going through tough times to be there. And this is something that is every parent's worst nightmare. But be there for them, love them, support them. Don't give up. Remember, you don't have to be alone. There is so much support out there today. As you're going to hear in a few moments, and you've sort of alluded to it shortly, but just one person never met on the phone, had a conversation, helped another family. There are so many resources available. Don't be shy. Reach out for help. Help is available. It's also important to know, and I have to say this practically, help for those suffering does not have to cost thousands and thousands of dollars. As a matter of fact, many times you can do it for free or close to nothing. Now that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be those cases that do cost money, and it doesn't mean that there aren't going to be situations that warrant it. And for that I have to say, do the proper research. All too often, we at Amudim are meeting with families who have been through 3, 4, 5 programs, bankrupted themselves, spent everything they had, just to find out that the first 3 or 4 programs made no sense for what their loved one was going through. But proper research wasn't done in advance. 12 Steps programs, as we know, are free. Support for the spouses, parents, children, and friends, Al-Anon, Gan-Anon meetings are free. But if someone does need to go to a program, as you heard, whether it's going to be detox, rehab, short-term, long-term, sober living, aftercare, the main things to keep in mind is A, find the right person to give you guidance to make sure that you're picking the right program. Google is not the answer to find good treatment. I cannot stress that enough. It is really, really a dangerous path to take. And we have seen it be so detrimental and so painful time and time again. Also remember something very important. When people go to a treatment program and then they fail out, it makes it that much more difficult to get them to go again, even if you found the right program. Because they're losing that hope, I'm just a failure. As we just heard before, whether it's being thrown out of yeshivas, schools, communities, camps, and now rehab. What could be worse than somebody finally stepping up and wanting to get help and then failing out of that as well? So it's extremely important. I mean, we ourselves, our staff, are extensively trained just to focus on that. To make sure that anyone that needs help can get the proper help. And plus with that, we need a lot of siyata d'shmaya to make sure. Because it's still not a guarantee, but you got to do the best you can. In addition to that, it's extremely important to make sure that the proper clinical and emotional and therapeutic help is for those that are around the person. You know, one of the things I say, and I've seen this time and time again over the years, somebody goes to rehab for 6 months. Let's use the example. Husband, breadwinner, loses everything, goes to rehab. 6 months later, comes out, comes back home. Wife is home with 3 kids. Wife did not go to meetings while he was gone, did not participate in groups, did not get the help she needs. All of a sudden, fight breaks out. You left me for 6 months. I had the kids. I had to worry about tuition, bills, food. What's the first thing this guy wants to do? He wants to relapse for a number of reasons. A, the pressure's still there. The underlying issues weren't dealt with. The support network that is so important did not build itself up to the point to handle it. And guess what? Quite frankly, 6 months in rehab, nobody nagged at him. People cared for him. It's just easier. Without getting proper support for the other affected individuals, it is very, very difficult to get people the help that they need. But going back to the original line of the evening, dealing with stigma. All too often, people refuse to get help because of stigma. They refuse to reach out. They refuse to make that call. I mean, I've said this story so many times, and I have to keep repeating it. I was doing an intervention with a mother of 5 children. This woman was in her 40s. I was sitting in the room with her husband, her family, Rav, her parents, her in-laws, myself, and an interventionist. And we're going nowhere. And I finally look at her and I say, you need to do this for your children, for your husband. And she says, for my children, that's why I can't do this. If I go to rehab, nobody's going to marry my kids. They'll find out that I went to rehab, and my kids will be the children of an addict. I can't do it. And I remember looking at her straight in the face and saying, you do realize the other option is death. Where you're heading now, there's no turning back. And she looks at me straight in the face and says, I know. But if I die, my children will be Yisomim, and that's okay, because people will marry them. But if I'm an addict, who is going to marry my children? Now, Baruch Hashem, in this specific case, she did get the help she needed. She's actually celebrated quite some time sober already, and we're still very close. But I can't say that I disagree with her. Because if as a community, we're not addressing these issues to destigmatize them, and the stigma is there, then why should she go get help? And I say this all the time, the dirtiest word in the Jewish language today begins with the letter S, shidduchim. The number one reason why people don't want to get the help that they need, and that's ridiculous. And of course, this is something that we face on a daily basis at work, at a daily basis. And that is why I have to say from a personal side, I thank everybody for coming here, because seeing this room full gives me chizuk. It gives me strength. Fighting a battle day in and day out, that in a very lonely place, I might add. But seeing this gives me the reason to want to get up and do this again. So for that, I personally want to say thank you. Speaking of Keddashim, I don't know how many people here saw the recent Amudim video release, the fourth of our series called the Kiddush Club. But I have to follow what Rabbi Rothwax mentioned, and again, I'm going to try to be brief, and really, I feel bad. I know time is short. But when we deal with Keddashim and Kiddush clubs, a lot of people like to come after me after that video and say, is it the Kiddush club that makes the addict? It's not true. It is true. We can argue back and forth, but a couple of things I want to bring out that's for sure true. Children seeing their fathers leaving shul, and instead of hearing the rabbi speak, or instead of davening, or instead of hearing the Torah, going to the back to drink is never a good thing. Because you're teaching your children alcohol is more important than what we should be doing. That's a fact. Children starting to drink at a young age, never a good thing either. That's a fact. Now I'm going to say the same thing that someone else said previously. I enjoy a drink. I'm not going to say I don't, but I do so responsibly. I have to be cognitive of my surroundings. I have children, there's friends, neighbors, families. You know, I see these people, they come back from a long trip and they come back with these duty-free bottles and they're showing it off and putting it on top of their cabinet. Look at this 32-year-old special whatever reserve and this wine that there's only a limited number. And they're teaching their children this is what's important. These bottles, this is what we have to look up to. You know, many years ago, my daughter who's now entering high school, so she was third or fourth grade, I had given a speech, and at that speech I was talking about, you know, just the importance of family spending time together. And I said I really wish that people would understand, not just on Shabbos, but during the week, take some time, be with your children, be with your loved one, be with your family. Well, I come home that night, my daughter was still up, don't ask me why, and she looks at me and goes, Tati, we should have dinner together. Now, I swear I thought my wife put her up to this, but she didn't. I said, what do you mean, sweetie? She goes, yeah, let's have dinner. I said, we do every Friday night. And we have lunch on Shabbos. And even Sunday morning sometimes we have breakfast. And she says, no, during the week it's important. We should do something together. So I decided then to do something for myself. And I share this as a piece of advice for everyone that's probably busier than I am. That is, Wednesdays in my house, we have what's called family dinner. My phones get turned off. Everybody that works with me will tell you the world can come to an end from 4:30 to 7:30 Wednesday. I am not available. And if I happen to be traveling that week, it'll be Tuesday or Thursday, but every single week there is one night that I am home with my wife and kids having dinner together, discussing what they did in school, what the work day was like, homework, until everyone is ready for bed. Simple family time, something that we unfortunately have lost in our generation. And I'm not blaming anybody. I know it takes two parents to support a household today. We're living in times between tuitions, mortgages, food, every expense. Spend time with your families. It's extremely crucial. And just to go back to the purpose of this conversation, let's debunk some of the myths that we have regarding addicts. People assume the addict is the person who's standing outside Yankee Stadium when you finish the game holding up the sign. I'll never forget this. He said, who am I kidding? I just want some drugs. Can you give me $1? I remember being impressed by that sign. I'm saying, usually they're the veterans. This guy just wanted to buy drugs. But that's not what it is in our community. It's people around us, family, friends, neighbors, people we wouldn't expect. And people turn to drugs for many reasons, and some of this was addressed earlier. Simplest of all, it could just be fun. Kids want to experiment. They see someone else doing something. Try something. There are those that suffer from a serious trauma, victims of childhood sexual abuse, severe bullying, so many other reasons. They're using drugs to get away from the pain. Those become very complicated because, as you heard from a few of the speakers, the pain doesn't leave. Start using drugs, more drugs, it doesn't go anywhere. And lately we're seeing this, what you heard before, and I'll say it again. I mean, I could blame the doctors, blame the drug manufacturers. It's not about blaming at this point. But people that have pain from serious issues, whether it's illness, whether it's cancer, whether it's car accidents, nerve damage, makes no difference. And they legitimately have this severe pain they can't get away from. And they're getting hooked onto medications. The one thing I know for certain, nobody ever woke up in the morning and said, I want to be a drug addict. I want to be an alcoholic. I promise you that's never happened. This is something that takes time and builds up. And I recently heard from a very, very close friend of mine, Rabbi Grossberg, who's the principal of a high school for what we would call at-risk girls. And he also runs a support group for people that deal with emotional issues and mental illness. And he looks at me and he says, Tzvi, you'll never believe this. This mother that was in one of the groups looked at me and said, you know, my daughter who's a junkie, she's a heroin addict, I sometimes wish that she would have just had cancer instead, because then the loved ones and those around me would support and feel empathy and show me empathy and be there. But because she's an addict, everybody's blaming her and blaming me. It's one of the saddest things I've ever heard, one of the saddest things he's heard. But it's a reality. Many times, families unwittingly are part of the process by enabling their loved ones. And I hate using that word because it is such a wide range of what enabling is. So the simplest answer I tell people is find a professional to guide you. Find someone to help you figure out if what you're doing is enabling or showing love. Where is that line? There is a line. Find it. We recently had a situation of a 43-year-old attorney, a partner in a prominent law firm, had a botched dental procedure, which caused him to go to the overuse of prescription drugs. By the time he came to us, he was thrown out of his house, bouncing from friend to friend. Wife didn't want to deal with him. There was no more money left. Literally, his whole life savings was gone. However, in that specific case, there were signs. There were early detection, as there is so often. But the people either were too embarrassed to reach out, didn't want to say anything, till it was too late. But what do we do to prevent this? What do we do to deal with it early on? So I'm going to say the number one thing we need to understand is, as parents, we are partners with our children's schools to be able to deal with this issue at a young age. And schools do need to step up. I know, Baruch Hashem, they're far better than they ever were, but we still have so much more to go. Curriculum-based learning for drug and alcohol awareness and prevention is a must in every single school. I don't care, from the most right-wing, most left-wing, everything in between. There was a study done recently, 11,000 schools, mostly prep schools in the country, brought in full curriculum on emotional well-being and addiction prevention programs. And the number, it's been going on, I think, for 7 or 8 years in those schools. Highest rates of graduations, increased grades, decrease in drug use. Something insane, I have to say this. You know, drugabuse.gov has a whole report on how ever since drug prevention programming, not just a one-time speech, came into the school systems, drug use in high schools and public schools on a national level are at an all-time low. I cannot say the same for the yeshivas in our communities. Now, I could say that the yeshivas won't admit that there's drugs there. I could tell you, when I gave a presentation recently to a whole group of high school principals, and I said, how many people here would let us do random drug testing in your schools? Nobody raised their hands. Okay, that's 2 years ago. Now Baruch Hashem, more stepped up to the plate. But I can tell you that there's still a major issue. We need to work with the schools to be able to get the schools to understand they are a partner with us. And yes, marijuana is becoming legal. You know what? Alcohol is legal too. We know that it kills. Just because something is legal doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't mean it should be encouraged. When kids see their parents smoking pot or eating brownies or gummies or whatever else it is, that's what they're going to learn from. We are an example for the next generation. Another new phenomenon, or newer phenomenon, vaping. I was speaking in a boys' high school a few weeks ago, and I remember somebody saying, what's the big deal? Vaping, it's safer than cigarettes. Well, that may be true if you smoke cigarettes and you're vaping to stop smoking cigarettes. May. But it's not healthy. There's nothing good that can come out of it. As a matter of fact, there was a report that was done now. I'm just trying to read the actual numbers here. What we're seeing in high schools now is flooding of adolescent brains with nicotine, which is leading to addictive behavior. This is the age of development, and they're putting in the most addictive substance the brain will ever come in contact with, nicotine, at rates that were never seen before. One of the therapists that I work with shared a story with me today. That he was sitting with a kid who was vaping while they were talking. And he's telling this kid, you're just vaping way too much, this is ridiculous. And he's like, oh, I don't even realize it, it's so common, I'm just doing it. He says, as a matter of fact, the kid tells the therapist, a few weeks ago I was watching a movie with some friends, and I was vaping the entire time while I was there. And then when I got up, I was dizzy and I threw up. And the therapist looks at him and he goes, you realize your body just had an adverse reaction to vaping, which is the first step to an overdose. On vaping. You realize how bad that is? And this high school student obviously did not. When I was sitting with somebody else, another friend of mine told me this story, that he was doing a lecture in a high school, and he made a comment about this, some girl says, yeah, but Juuls has no nicotine, so it's okay. That's the newest, most popular brand of vaping, which, by the way, not sure how it's still legal, but they're using all the tactics the cigarette companies used to use as far as getting the young ones excited about it. Good colors, and when you inhale, it lights up, LEDs and whatnot. And he says to her, what are you kidding me? There's 10 times more nicotine in what you're vaping than in an average cigarette. She goes, no, that's not true. Look, it doesn't say anything on the box, which she's right. I'm not sure how they get away with that. These are issues that are real, and they're real in our community, and it's up to us as a group to stand up. And being here tonight is certainly the first step as a community. I'm going to leave you off with two final thoughts. One of them is, and this is on the topic of what we said earlier and why this candle was lit, I just think it's important that everybody understands that, because most of us know somebody who lost someone due to an overdose or drug or alcohol-related incident. So I just want to explain how that happens so we don't blame the wrong people on these things. The human body is built in a very interesting way. When we take in toxins and substances that don't belong by us, the body tries to fight it off. So we'll use drugs, for example. Somebody starts using a certain amount of drugs. The body starts building up a tolerance to it, and they need more of that same dose to get they need more of the dose to get the desired high. And that keeps building up time and time again. And then either the person ends up getting sober or dying, one or the other. But let's go on the side that they got sober. And now their body rids itself of those toxins. And then all of a sudden they're clean for a certain amount of time, and now they hit a speed bump in the road of life. The first thought that goes back is, I just have to get over this hump. I need something just to carry me over this experience, this painful time. And they remember what that dose was that got them that last desired high, without realizing that their body can no longer handle it. I can say that 90% of all death by drug overdoses are accidental overdoses from this exact scenario. People that were sober for an extended period of time relapsed and died that first time. That just shows us how much more we have to be there for those in recovery. Make sure they have a sponsor, be there, support them, emotional, physical, whatever they need. So that if they do have that speed bump, they have who to come to. They reach out to the sponsor, they call you, they get there before they end up, chas v'shalom, dead. And then the story that I like to end off with at each of my events that I speak at. Many times it's very, very painful in the world we live in. We don't get to see the fruits of our labor, sometimes for a very long time. But the problems we see constant. I have the most dedicated, amazing staff in the world that I'm with them. And I feel bad for each and every one of them every single day for what they have to go through at work. But I remind myself of the story from Rabbi Eckstein, who opened up an organization called Dar Yesharim after losing a bunch of children to Tay-Sex. Now, at the time that Dar Yesharim was open, what many people don't know is he was ostracized, banned, put into Chayrim. By all ends of the spectrum, you're playing God. How dare you tell people what they should or shouldn't marry, matching numbers. A couple of years ago, Kingsburg Jewish Medical Center reached out to Rabbi Eckstein and asked that he please come down for an important meeting. Schedule worked out. He was scheduled to come whatever the date was. And he shows up for this meeting. And what the meeting really was a ceremony of closing down the Tay-Sex ward at KBJ, which was basically hospice where children that were born with Tay-Sex would go to die. He had single-handedly eradicated Tay-Sex from within our community. I'm not saying we could do that, I'm hoping we could, but we have to try. We have to try to eradicate addiction, substance abuse, and alcoholism from within our community, because that is the only way that we'll be able to move forward. I want to thank you guys again for putting this together, a power couple who really stopped at nothing. And I really do want to thank all of you for coming, and I really wish for the day that we no longer have to have any of these speeches. Thank you very much.